Hello, and welcome to today's live stream, Paddling in Paradise, Navigating the Waters of the Connecticut River. It's a gorgeous day here in Western Massachusetts, and this is going to be our last live stream of the season. And we've scheduled it so you can get excited and motivated to launch your own river adventure. My name is Stacy Leonard. I'm the events manager here at Connecticut River Conservancy. Thank you for joining us. I'm joined today by Gabrielle Chevalier, CRC's Recreation and Restoration Programs Manager, who also sits on the executive committee of the Connecticut River Paddlers Trail. And she'll share lots of information about the trail and how you can get involved. And we have two special guests who have paddled the full length of the Connecticut River. Our first guest will be Tim Walsh. Tim is a retiree with over 30 years working in public and private schools and 22 years of service in the Air Force Reserves. Tim has section hiked the entire Appalachian Trail, Long Trail, completed the entire Connecticut River, and had paddled over 300 miles of the Chattahoochee River in Georgia before stopping short of his goal when he came across a 15-foot alligator. All of his adventures have been solo experiences. Welcome, Tim. Our second guest will be Mary Anderson, known as Mary Badass in the long distance hiking world. Mary is an avid adventurer and writer, committed to understanding and healing trauma in the world. Now in her late 60s, she has hiked over 19,000 miles and completed numerous paddling, bicycling, and cross-country ski adventures. We are so lucky to have these two powerhouse people with us today. Before we get started, I just want to share our usual housekeeping details. We're saving time at the end for your questions, so please put anything you think of in the moment in the chat, and we'll get to them later. We are also recording this episode, and we'll post it on our YouTube channel, where you can also see past live stream recordings. And later today, I'll email you and everybody who registered a link to the recording, as well as all the resources that are being shared today. Before I turn this over to Gabrielle to get us started, I just wanted to acknowledge that we've learned there's a new through paddler who finished their journey on the river last week. That's Jessie Straunch. And I hope that we get to see Jessie at the end and maybe ask a few questions of Jessie for what it's like this year. So congratulations to you. Before we do move on, also throw in the chat if you're a through paddler or have completed any section of the Connecticut River by paddling. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Gabrielle, and again, welcome you all for being here today. We'll see you for the Q&A at the end.
Hi, everyone. Like Stacy said, my name is Gabrielle, and I work at the Connecticut River Conservancy in the recreation and restoration world. And I sit on the executive committee of the Connecticut River Paddlers Trail, which we'll be talking about a little bit today. Just a quick, I know there are folks coming from within the watershed and outside the watershed, so just a quick overview of what we're working with. The Connecticut River Paddlers Trail and the Connecticut River sits within the Connecticut River Paddlers Connecticut River watershed, which runs in 4 states, so Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Connecticut, and is made up of over 7 million acres that all drain into the Connecticut River, all the tributaries, and then out into the Long Island Sound. So all the way from the Connecticut border, or the Canadian border at the headwaters down to the Long Island Sound. And so this area represents almost 400 communities that have over 2 million people in them. And the Connecticut River and the watershed was designated as a National Blueway in 2012. And so the Connecticut River Paddlers Trail is a series of primitive campsites and access points spanning the length of the 410 miles of the Connecticut River. And so the goal there being that someone like Tim and Mary and Jessie and many of you can put in up close to the headwaters and paddle in one fell swoop or in sections down through the Connecticut River, through the 4 states, and out towards the Long Island Sound, staying at these campsites along the way. An important thing to recognize is that the Connecticut River Paddlers Trail is governed, it's a friends group, it's governed by 20+ member organizations, state agencies, individual members, land trusts, conservancies, conservation organizations. And so all of us are working together to create new access points, to take care of campsites, to monitor conditions along the way, to work with hydro companies to advocate for better recreation access along the river. And all of that is grant funded and donation funded. So a lot of really great work goes into maintaining these sites across the watershed by hundreds of individuals and tens or dozens of groups. So quick camping facts for those of you who haven't been on the Connecticut River. As you can see on the top here, we try and have this camping site, this camping sign. As you can see, there's the Paddlers Trail logo and then a little tent sign to demonstrate where there is a campsite. So some folks are navigating the river and looking out for these, and some folks are using different navigational guides to get there. But the campsites are first come, first serve, generally leave no trace. The campsites vary site to site along the river because they're all stewarded by different organizations. They may contain tent platforms for like 10 to 12 camps, or 10 to 12 folks, a couple different tents. Some of them are bigger, some are smaller, some are up kind of large embankments, some are floodplains, some might have bear boxes or different privies or informational kiosks. So they vary across the watershed. Next slide, please. Just a little bit about, I'm going to do a very brief overview. There's a lot of information to talk about here. And like Stacy said at the end, she'll send out some information, and I'm happy to pop my email in the chat if folks have questions about this. Just saying that sometimes it can be daunting to think about how you're going to get out and recreate on the river. We all have our favorite spots that we go back to time and time again. I know for myself, sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm curious about this other beach that I haven't been to, but it's a little daunting to think about going there. And so just sharing that there are maps and guides available for purchase and download, and a wealth of resources that can help you get out on the river. In 2022, maybe, we launched a smartphone app with Far Out Guides, which is an app that allows you to geolocate yourself using your smartphone on the trail in real time, information about how far you are from the campsites, where your nearest water source might be, where a restock is available, where there's an access point or a portage trail. So that's for folks that are interested in using kind of technological services to help them on the trail. We also certainly have the tried and true folks that say, I'd like to just use a paper map, understanding that water flows towards the sound to navigate. So we also have waterproof, 2 separate maps, one for Vermont, New Hampshire, and one for Massachusetts and Connecticut, which was just the 2023, the Connecticut, Massachusetts one. Work on it with members of the executive committee and partner organizations did a lot of great work to get that map out. And there's also laminated section that covers camping areas and resources and is Paddlers Trail specific. And then there's also some laminated and waterproof maps that are geared a little bit more towards like motorboat access and have a little bit more information about like depth of the river or where there might be ramp style launches as opposed to hand carry. So also encouraging that type of recreation and understanding that there are different needs around guiding. We have the Connecticut River Boating Guide, which is a little bit outdated in fact, in the sense that there are new campsites that have been added, but it's a great companion guide. It talks about historical significance, geologic significance, and partners well with the trail maps and the smartphone app. And last but not least, the free kind of one-stop shop for information about the Paddlers Trail and how to navigate it and resources and where there's outfitters is the Connecticut River Paddlers Trail website, which is just connecticutriverpaddlerstrail.org. There's an interactive map and all of the information that exists in the trail maps, the app, and the boating guide also exists on the website. And there's a forum where folks ask questions, and you can where you can reserve campsites, and a lot of information to be found there. Next slide, and I think my last slide. Just to tee us into what we're talking about today is Source to Sea Paddlers. Today we're recognizing 2 paddlers who have paddled the length of the Connecticut River, and we love to recognize and celebrate folks when they complete this huge adventure. I myself am about, I think, just shy of 200 miles into my journey, and am waiting for the day that I get to get the Paddlers Trail boat sticker to put on my boat and share my story of my section paddles to complete it. So this is just an invitation, as Stacy said. If you've started your journey, or you want to register your journey, or you want to tell us about your time on the Connecticut River, you can visit us at connecticutriver.org/paddlers recognition, or again, all this information is on the Connecticut River Paddlers Trail. So with that, I'm going to tee it off to Tim to tell us a little bit about his journey.
First of all, I want to thank Stacy for reaching out for me to come on her podcast. It's exciting. It's exciting for me to share my experiences paddling solo down to Connecticut. You might wonder why a guy from Georgia would drive 1,200 miles and strap a 12-foot kayak on the back of his, on top of his RAV4, would come up here to paddle the Connecticut, and I did it 2 years in a row. My family also had the same questions. They said, "Dad, hey, maybe there's some rivers a little bit closer to home than the Connecticut. Maybe you can start there." But let me tell you what motivated me to come on to the Connecticut. But first of all, before I ever heard of the Paddlers Trail, I enjoyed paddling the Chattahoochee River. And it's also a large, long river. It goes from the mountains of North Georgia all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. And it's about 400 miles, so it's equivalent to the Connecticut. And I started up there, and I section paddled all the way down to Columbus, Georgia, which is about 300 miles away from where I started. And that's when I first started seeing these signs that said, "Please don't feed the alligators." And I said, "Whoa, man, I didn't realize there was alligators down here." And then they had signs that said that no wading and no swimming, beware of the alligators. So they were buying it. After a while, I said, "Wow." So I talked to some local people, and they said, "Well, don't worry about the alligators. If you don't bother them, they won't bother you." And I said, "Oh, well, I don't know. They bother me already. I don't want to be paddling with beside an alligator." But I kind of convinced myself I could go down to the Gulf of Mexico if I was careful. And so after my last section paddle, I was at home reading the newspaper, and I came across an article about these 2 guys from Columbus area that found Big Al. He was a 15-foot alligator that weighed 700 pounds. And that kind of motivated me to say, I don't know if I want to keep going. And my wife kind of motivated me too as well. I said, "Maybe you need to go someplace else." So I started looking around, researching on the East Coast for some rivers, and I saw a lot of them. But when I came up to the Connecticut River Conservancy, it was a wonderful website. It had all the information I wanted. It talked about the Paddlers Trail. It had a map. I bought a map from them. Then I bought the guidebook from them. And then I went out and got the far out app for my phone. And then I thought, "Well, I'm going to go. I made a commitment. I'm going to go." So I started planning, getting all my gear together. Luckily, I'd hiked before, so I had most of the camping gear I needed. The gear for the kayak, you have to get all that information down to get that, all the stuff, the different shoes you have to wear to portage 3 miles, or walk through mud that's a foot deep. So and I watched every video on the YouTube, and I started planning my trip. And within 7 months, I was driving up to the Connecticut to start my journey up there. And my motivation was the Big Al. People ask me, they say, what's the most remarkable part of the entire trail, the journey? And my reply is that the entire experience, the entire river, was amazing. It surpassed any expectation that I had. There would be no journey, however, there would be no journey possible without the big blue highway. I call it the big blue highway. And most people call it the Connecticut River. But without that, without the passage all the way from the Canadian border all the way down to the sounds of New York, Long Island, it's amazing. The entire time, it's amazing every day. The river starts up in the mountains of Vermont and near Canada. It divides New Hampshire and Vermont, and then you got all these thick trees and forests around you, and you can't. I don't think the sunlight even shines through those things. It's so thick up there. And then you paddle around, you go around a hill, a little mountain, and then you see another view, and then you paddle further on, and then you go through some grasslands and farmlands. It's a beautiful experience, and you get to camp out alongside of all that stuff. It's amazing. I saw countless on the river. I saw countless little ducklings, like the mother duck and about 10 little ducklings behind them. They're paddling along. It looked like they were in a little parade. You see the fish. The fish, like this picture you're seeing. The fish are floating and they're darting back and forth underneath your kayak. And every once in a while, they'll jump out of the water. It's an exciting experience. It's fascinating. And then you paddle along, and then you see the blackberries growing on the side of the bank. It's hard not to do it, but you paddle over there and you grab a handful of blackberries and supplement your your meals. So that is beautiful. The Blue Highway, I call it the Blue Highway. It's the sports to the wildlife all along the way. I saw deer out there, muskrats, beavers. I saw wild turkeys. I saw box turtles. I saw salamanders. I saw songbirds, loons, bald eagles. They're all out there. They're flying around. It's an amazing sight. It's an amazing sight. And these guys, all this wildlife, all the woodland, they've been there for hundreds of years, if not thousands. They've been there a lot longer than any dam was built. They were there before any cities were built. They've been there, or any motorboat was ever assembled. These people, these animals, these creatures, they were surviving well without us, and they still are. And I just have a shout out to the Connecticut River Conservancy for all the work they do. I mean, it's tremendous. You go onto the website, and all the people that are there, that they're keeping, they clean the river all the time. They have volunteers. The last time they did it, they picked up over 1,000 pounds of trash along the river, and they keep it clean all the way. It's 400 miles. They do a good job. They test the river. You got people all along the river that keep testing it. They have lawyers. They have to go after some companies sometimes to find out who's polluting the river. And so that all is involved. My hat's off to the Connecticut River. But as you go past New Hampshire and Vermont, you go through Massachusetts and Connecticut, the landscape changes. It's the elevation drops, but wildlife is plentiful. And there are people there. That's what I always think. The people show up in Connecticut and Massachusetts because there's more cities along the river. And they're there to celebrate the river just as much as a kayaker is. You see the guys out fishing on the banks, they're fishing on the sandbars. Some of them are fishing from their the rowboats. And then you see people that are out there on their pontoons. They're resting on the pontoons, or they're on their stand-up paddle boards, or they got the little small yachts that they drive around. It's nice. And I saw numerous marinas with people working on boats and docks. It's a community-wide from 400 miles that people are taken care of. And the wonderful Blue Highway is what is the most remarkable part. It keeps all this. People are relying on this. People's jobs, the animals rely on everything. Everybody along that corridor is relying on this big blue river that keeps rolling on year after year, hundreds of years. And the Conservancy, I think they're going to keep another 100 years or maybe 1,000 years to keep it going. So my hat's off to them. Somebody asked me about the challenges, and one of the biggest challenges, unfortunately, are the people. They're not doing it on purpose. They just are enjoying themselves so much that sometimes they overlook the little kayak or the canoe that's paddling by when they might be going a little bit too fast for conditions. But they're out there trying to enjoy it as much as we are. And so that's one of the challenges. Another challenge is being able to control your kayak. I mean, people just can't jump out there on the river with a kayak and say, hey, I want to go down. You got to be able to control fast moving waters. It's a tough skill. You've got to navigate yourself through docks and unload and load and everything else like that. It takes a while. But camping kayak camping is that's the most challenging of everything. If you haven't done it before, you need to practice before you go. You need to practice at home. You gotta be ready to go. You gotta be able to load your kayak. There's a lot of things involved with this camping. And then you see the picture of the portage trail. That's what trails are, walking trails. Most of the times they're walking trails, like you see in the picture. They go maybe a quarter of a mile, or half a mile, or a mile that you have to use your portage trail. And then sometimes you have to walk through a small little village or a town on the sidewalks. And that's a fun part. I enjoy doing that. You get a lot of questions while you're walking along a 3-mile portage on the trail. The picture you see there is an incident where my first portage ever. I was excited about that. And I get up there and put on my cart, and it's unattached. It's unattached. I'm up in the high mountains of Vermont, and there's nobody around. Nobody. The traffic there's not existing. The closest village, it has a population of 260 people. So there's not much people that can help you. You got to figure out that no matter how much planning you do, you got to figure it out. But with the kayaking and all that group together, it is challenging. It's a very challenging activity. And I guess I'm closing up. This is me getting close to close to the end of the 400 paddle. I just came to a terrific paddle. And I started on the other side of Hartford, Connecticut that morning. I started out the other side of Connecticut. I didn't have my phone. Something was stolen. The charger, my cords, everything was gone. And I was paddling that whole way. That bridge there is probably at I'd gone 30 miles that day. And I was going against tides, which a Georgia boy doesn't know a whole lot about the tides rolling in. It was pouring rain. But that was the finish of that. So I enjoyed sharing that. Hopefully that brought some excitement, and that you want to come out and just get on the river. There's so many people are doing such good work. There's such good work at the Conservancy that with this show our appreciation. Get down there and do a little paddling, or even if you're just sitting on the dock of the bay and fishing there, it'll be fun for you. So I think my time's about up with this picture. All right.
Thank you, Tim. That was wonderful. Well, if you have questions for Tim, please put them in the chat, and we'll have some time at the end. And now we'll bring on Mary to share her story.
Hi. About 4.5 years ago, I arrived home and my house like
there's also, I forget the other person.
Can you hear me?
Let's just get other people to mute before you start.
Okay.
Okay. Let's try again.
So about 4.5 years ago, I arrived home. My house looked like it had been robbed. And the man I had married to, without telling me, had left, taken everything, left $7 in our main bank account. And I was kicked into a really childhood abuse dissociative state where I was seriously suicidal. So I went back to adventuring. I hiked the Continental Divide Trail, 3,600 miles over 2 years. Then I rode my bike to all 251 cities and towns in Vermont. Then I cross-country skied the Catamount Trail. And then I thought, well, since I'd hiked, biked, and skied Vermont, I should paddle it. And then it was like, why stop at Vermont? So I started learning about the Connecticut River Paddlers Trail. This map is excellent. And now they make the second one. So you no longer need these maps. And you can buy them laminated, but you see what happens when you don't have the laminated versions. So this is all my gear packed up, and I use different color dry bags to help my old lady brain remember what was in each one and make it easier to find. So I drove up on June 4th in 2022 to the Canadian border and hiked up here into the 4th Connecticut Lake, which is formed by a beaver dam. And I walked around the lake and found where the Connecticut River was percolating out of the ground, stuck my feet in, then walked back around the lake and tried to follow the outlet down as far as I could go. You can't paddle that part. Eventually, you come to the larger Connecticut lakes, which are formed by power dams. And from June 4th to June 6th, I paddled these. Sometimes when it's calm, it's great, but when the wind comes up, it's a chore paddling those lakes. I did this part in a lightweight open canoe and decided that's not how I wanted to do the river. Then the next section is whitewater. So I live in Vermont. I went home, I donned my whitewater gear. It was June 12th, so an anniversary today. And I know that because today is my 67th birthday. Then I got some whitewater friends and we gathered our kayaks and we paddled the 12-mile whitewater section. And then we also portaged around the dam and did a few more miles of the flatwater section. Then I went back home and I found this kayak by the side of the road in somebody's trash. It was perfect for the journey. My friend Dot wanted to join me, so I waited for her. And on the 22nd of June, we went up and started where we had taken out. This set of wheels was phenomenal for portaging. It was 17 pounds, but I strapped it on the back of my boat and it was invaluable. And there I was ready to start the trip. I carried a mini digital recorder as a way to document the trip. The beginning of the river was fairly agricultural. The river wasn't all that wide and it was quite shallow. There were some rapids in it, which we did scout and portage. This one we did not portage because it was an old dam with rebar in the river that could damage a boat. They've now taken that rebar out. So, but on this case, we ended up portaging, and this is what we had to portage. You can see the portages weren't often easy. They involved hills. This one looks like it would be easy, but then it dissolved into this. Again, you can see that the portages involved a lot of steps, but they were well marked. I never worried about going over a dam. Even the rapids were well marked. This is a rapid in Heartland, Vermont that I paddled with my whitewater boat. I would not do it in a fully loaded kayak, and especially if you don't know whitewater. But most of the time, this is what the river was like. I loved the early mornings and the reflections of the water. It was really special. But the dams created these big lake-like areas, which again could become difficult when the wind picked up, but it also created a lot of recreation areas. And the people would inevitably start talking with you and invite us in and feed us, which was great. This guy's holding a wrench because, like Tim, I had a problem with one of the bolts on my portage cart, and he fixed it with that wrench and then gave me the wrench. I carried it the rest of the way. This woman, we were down in the river not knowing we were near a campground, and I was saying to Dot, I'm so hungry. And this woman said, is somebody down there hungry? Come on up. And they fed us. And on the 4th of July, this woman also invited me up. By this time, I was again solo on the river. And I was saying, my boat needs a name. And she said to me, well, you're just like Forrest Gump. So your boat is Jenny. So there's the Jenny. I loved it. It was hard to get good flower pictures because my boat, of course, was constantly moving in the river. There was often some wind, but we did find these babies. And these black raspberries were maddeningly just out of reach. Every time I saw them, I couldn't quite reach them from my boat. There was an area that was just full of water lilies and the air smelled wonderful. I paddled for quite a ways through them. Did see quite a bit of wildlife, deer, some bear, signs of bear. There were a lot of beaver that loved to come up to my boat and slap their tail without me knowing they were there. And boy, did I jump. There were also a lot of geese, a lot of loons. We saw one sea monster, a lot of herons and swans, which surprised me. A lot of swallows, which were great. We had no insects, so to speak. I did not have to worry about mosquitoes on the trip. There was a lot of poison ivy, but not mosquitoes. I saw many, many bald eagles. And these fish fins, which were down towards the coast. There were a couple of places, very few, where I encountered a little bit of industrial feeling. This was a construction zone just after the White River fed into the Connecticut. And there was only one area I found that had a little bit of trash in it, which was, again, down in Connecticut. Of course, the dams created more of a technological, kind of less rural feel. But in general, even the cities, Hartford, looked beautiful from the river. And most of the time, the river was really bucolic. And again, I loved the early mornings on the river. So when I reached the Turner's Falls Dam on about the 20th of July, I had an appointment so that I wanted to get home for. So a friend picked me up at the dam. I made arrangements to leave my kayak there. I drove home. I resupplied with food and I put my e-bike on the back of the car. Then I drove my car all the way down to Long Island Sound and parked my car at the school down there, called the police, got it all okayed. And then I rode my bike. I took 2 days to ride my bike, the 100 miles back up to the dam. And then the dam portaged my boat around because it was still during COVID days. They wouldn't put me in the truck. So they portaged my boat. I rode my bike around the dam. And then they took my bike back to the dam and stored it for me until I got back from the river. Again, these were the signs she was pointing out for a campground. You pulled in here and went up. They were fairly well marked. I do recommend the Far Out app, the River Guide. I use it for even all my backpacking trips. It's a phenomenal thing if you want to use technology. Otherwise, the Connecticut River Paddlers Guide maps are great. Sometimes to get to a campground, you had to hike up, but you had great views, almost always a picnic table and a great outhouse. Other times the camping areas were down low and I would pull my whole boat in. You can see the wheels there. I used backpacking gear, my tent. Some of them had phenomenal trees, even the beech trees, which weren't diseased. I was really impressed by the quality of trees at some of the campsites. And this was the Holyoke Rose. So after Hartford, it was harder to find a campsite for a little bit. So I contacted them, nonprofit that gets folks out on the river, and they let me camp there. There was a skunk trying to get into my tent all night, but it was great. They let me use the facilities and was phenomenal. Also, these women at Wethersfield Cove, I called them and they said, sure, you can camp up here. And they left their office and came down to meet me. and let me put my tent up right along their pathway here. Now, there was an outhouse in the parking lot, but there was no water. Often people started getting wind of my trip on Facebook and they'd say, what can I do to help? And I'd say, you can leave water, because I did have a filter that I could filter the water from the river with. But in general, I preferred not doing that. And because I filter water when I'm backpacking all the time, but because I was in a boat, I could carry a couple gallons of water at a time. So this is what I had people do, you know, for Through Paddler, when I'd pick it up and explain, here's somebody left me a couple gallons under the ferry bridge. Now, people often say, did you get into trouble? Were you scared? This was the one place where I thought, oh no, this isn't going to go well. So I had navigated there's some rapids near Enfield, and I navigated them. And then rather than really studying my map and trusting myself, I went online and trusted what the people on Facebook were saying, which I should not have done, because they kept saying paddle it river left, which I did. And I ended up, it turned out there was an old breached dam there that I got caught on, and I got caught sideways on this rock, and the water was moving at a good pace. And I thought, this is not going to be pretty. I'm going to go sideways over this. And it was a little bit frightening for a moment, but luckily I am a whitewater paddler and I was able to stay upright and figure out what to do. And I ended up getting out of my boat and lining to shore and getting around it. Now, after I did the part on the bike, I actually started wearing my bike vest. And the reason for that was because the river started getting a lot wider and the boats got a lot bigger. Up north, there were just tiny little fishing boats. But down here, this is near Northampton, and then the boats kept getting bigger and bigger. And so I wanted to make sure I was seen, so I wore that bright orange vest. And the wake of the boats also got larger. Sometimes I had to turn, you know, to face into them so they didn't swamp me. The other thing I had to deal with as I got further south was the tide. So when I pulled in here at night, this area here was actually bare ground. And you can see that here it's full of water. If I had left my boat here at night, it would have gotten washed away. And this is another example of that. This is the very last campground I stayed in. You can see where my boat is. This is where the boat was parked, was beached in that picture. This, you can see how low the tide got. And this is how high the tide reached. So if I had left my boat down here, again, it would have gotten washed away. And paddling against the tides was sometimes challenging. So I sometimes timed my paddle to be going with the tide. This was my campsite on that last evening. My last morning, pulling out, there were some great sights along the side of the river. But you can see how the tides really changed the river and how much bigger it was. There's that same bridge that Tim had shown. And there I'm starting to see, you know, you see the lighthouse there off on the right, reaching out. And there I finished the trip. I put my hand in because I couldn't put my foot in. And when I turned around to go back is when I realized I had been paddling for a good push that morning. I was hungry, I was tired, I was now fighting against the tide. I had a brief moment of thinking, oh, going back down is when people die on Everest. But it was, you know, it was a chore paddling back in against the tide, but it worked. And I ended up coming out at the yacht club, which was down there. And a lovely man, Jim, helped me load my bike back. In fact, he let me take a shower there. He was ready to take a shower. And he said, no, you go in and take it. And then he helped me load my boat on the car. I got the boat on the car. I drove back to the dam, picked up my bike, and went home. And that was my trip. I was on the river a total of 31 days.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mary. What a great adventure. So I invite people to turn on their cameras if they want to. And just a round of applause for Tim and Mary for that sharing their amazing adventures. And it seems like from the chat, we have Tim, Tina, and Jesse have all been through paddlers on the trail. So if you want to like make some movement so we see who's who. Tina's waving in the car. Jesse, I see you. And Tim is no stranger to CRC. Tim is on our board of directors and has given one of these talks in a past year about his adventures, which you can find on our YouTube channel. So we're going to move into the Q&A portion, and I didn't see too many questions already put in the chat, except somebody was wondering about the camping, but then Mary answered it. So if people want, if you're familiar, you can raise your hand in the Zoom world under the reactions area, and then that will kind of set up a queue of people who want to ask a question, or you can continue to put them in the chat box if that's easier, or you can just wave around and we can try and call on you. But I can't see everybody in one window, so it helps to do the raise your hand feature. While people are trying to figure out their questions, I guess I have a general question to kick us off. And that is, well, I have many, but let's see which one I'll pick. Maybe each of you could just share if there was one piece of advice you'd give to someone who wanted to go out on the trail and hadn't done a whole huge overnight place-to-place paddle. What would you suggest? Your topmost advice? Mary, do you want to start?
No, I'm sorry.
Do you have some advice you want to share? Just like
advice?
a tidbit.
I'd
Top of
say
mind.
if you're at all interested, do it. And don't be afraid of doing it solo. The maps, the Connecticut River maps are great. And if you're willing to use technology, the Far Out app is phenomenal. I've used it for the Continental Divide Trail but I would also encourage people, if you do use the app, there's comments on it. People can leave comments. So you can, like, I left comments for other people, and I see where Jesse actually used them. And I encourage people to make comments because they'll help the next paddlers that come along.
Great. And Tim, do you want to share a little bit of advice? And then we'll go to some more questions. And just unmute yourself.
Do I get highlighted? Yeah, there I am. Okay, the first thing, my birth certificate says I'm going to be 72 years old next month. So the age is not a problem. All right, that's the first thing. But you got to be active. If you're not doing anything, if you're just sitting and watching other people, you got to stay active the rest of your life. So just put that the first thing you got to do is be active. And then maybe camping, overnight camp or backyard. I mean, that's where I started, in going into your backyard and doing some camping. That's a good way. And then you venture out and you do maybe an overnight camp somewhere, and you do that. Then if you're serious about kayaking or canoeing, go someplace, an outfitters where you can rent one. So you can get on the river and you can rent one, and for 4 or 5 hours, and see if you like it. You might say that's the last thing I want to do. And then if you like it, then you can start doing more trips or going different places. They can pick you up. There's a lot of people, and there's tons of people that want to help you all along the way.
That's wonderful. I like that, piece by piece. And it was heartwarming to hear, as you just said, from Mary about all the people who were so helpful along the way. So I'm going to go to Gabrielle and then Mike F, and then we'll go back to the chat.
I was just going to share, to Mary's point about the Far Out guides and the comments that folks leave. Those are also indescribably valuable to the partner organizations that manage the trail, because I'm keeping tabs on those comments, and sometimes someone will say, oh, this campsite doesn't have steps, and it should have steps up to the tent platforms. And then I say, okay, who's stewarding that campsite? And so I might reach out to the folks up at Upper Valley Land Trust, and I say, oh, there aren't steps. And then the Upper Valley Land Trust might say, oh my God, we put those steps in last week. They must have gone downstream. And so those types of comments are helpful for future paddlers, and are also incredibly helpful for the organizations that steward it. And I would think, Stacy, to your question just about what feels like a piece of advice, is we get questions to CRC all the time of, can you connect me with someone who's done the trail? Or I have a question about this piece of the trail, or how did someone do this? And I think that, to Mary's point of like, just trying all of these different resources, there's this huge wealth of information of folks that have done the trail and want to share their stories. So I think continuing to ask those questions and go in with as much information as you can.
Great, thanks, Gabriel. Mike, would you like to go next? And just unmute.
Okay, sorry about that. My phone wasn't cooperating.
No problem.
Yeah, so I'm a total newbie. I've never been out on the river. Maybe I've kayaked like twice in my life. I'm interested in paddle boarding, but prone paddle boarding, not stand up. And I'm in Connecticut, and I guess my main concern is like safety and if there's any resources to be able to tell what the conditions on the river are, in terms of like, is there too much of a current or something like that, or is there a seasonal window? Obviously the weather's warm in the summer, but is there like a window where the river's kind of most safe to get on, times to avoid? Interested in stuff like that.
Great, I see Mary wanting to answer that question.
Yeah, so the river does it does run higher in the spring, and in the rapid sections, you want to be aware of that especially. It is lower as you go along, and you're going to end up hitting some rocks, depending on the kind of boat you have. So there is a window, and you do want to be a bit aware of that. And you'd want to, if you're not a whitewater paddler, there's a few places where I would portage around. That is all noted on the maps, those Connecticut River Paddlers maps. Also, oh, you asked one other question I really wanted to answer, and now it's going through my head. Oh, I'm sorry. Do you remember what one of your other main?
Some way to,
What was that?
well, I mean, was there
Safe-
like a season or just like a way to check the conditions of the river?
Yeah. Oh, so that was another big thing.
Low or
Two things.
level?
Two things. For safety, I always carry a little Garmin mini satellite device. It has an SOS button if you need it, and you can also send preset messages. Most of the time I could get service on my phone on the river, but I carry the device because I carry it in the woods anyway and had it for backup. So there's that. And I also did check at the dams when water releases were going to be, because I did not want to be putting my boat into the river like 10 minutes before they release the dam and have a flood of water coming at me. And you can do that by going to the dam websites. But other than that, you can check river flows. There are places online. The USGS has a website where you can find out what the river flow is. But for the most part, if you're not running it during the high flood season, you're going to be okay as long as you portage around any rapids that you're not up for paddling.
I think I would just also add, if you're a new paddler, to go to your most local like supply shop, or you might be able to find an outfitter who can tell you about the very local conditions where you are, and start small, like an hour on the water day trip, or get a lesson. Those are some helpful things for brand new people. I'm going to go back into the chat with some questions. There was a question about battery packs and how do you charge it. Keep your phone on
And I'll just
airplane
say,
mode.
I'll just
Please.
say that Stacy at the end of this is going to send out an email, Mike, to your point of like state specific guiding companies, outdoor outfitters, local resources. Something that we always make sure that we encourage is that the decision to be out on the water is up to the person paddling, and encouraging safety and preparation. And so, like Stacy said, there are many outfitters and organizations that help can help you build up to feeling confident and safe. And also what Mary said, using stream gauges like Rivercast or the USGS water levels, and always making sure to check the dam flows as well.
Great. One question here is, what would you suggest as a good 1 to 2 night starter section of the river? And maybe you can also, well, yeah, we'll just start there. Tim, did you have a favorite part?
You have
You
to
just have to
unmute.
unmute.
I would hesitate to, if you haven't been out on the paddleboard or whatever, I would hesitate to go first jump into the Connecticut River. I'm sure there's some other places you can try that's a little bit calmer and you don't have such problems about that. That's what I would do with that. The favorite section, it's just, I love being up in New England, up in Vermont and New Hampshire. That was thrilling up there. That's the isolation. If you want to be isolated, solo paddle. It doesn't get any better than that. It's just a remarkable situation up there. That's what we do it. But every part, every part is it's enjoyable. Even when you have to go down with all the people and all the boats, it's you just have to make it enjoyable. You gotta, like Mary said, you gotta sometimes have to get up and just let them go by, because those waves get big. But we got a couple of minutes. I want to have a shout out. When I was coming up to Georgia, I was trying to figure out how to get my transportation. Mary had hers all planned out, had bicycles, and she had cars, and she had people picking up. I couldn't figure out how to get my car from, Hanover, New Hampshire, down to Osage, whatever, down south. And okay. It looks like, hopefully I'm still on. And I got on Facebook and I started sending out messages, and I found 2 river angels. They were living in Quaker Hill, Connecticut. It saved my life. I drove up to their house. They've had me spend the night at them, and then they drove me all the way up to Hanover, New Hampshire, and then with my car, dropped my kayak out. They dropped my car back down with them, and I've been friends with them ever since that time. It's and when I go on vacation up there, I'll stop by there and see them. So you meet so many good friendships, as Mary pointed out on her, that there's a lot of people you don't even know become your friends.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tim. Jim Lawless, were you trying to raise your hand?
Yeah, first I wanted to just say hi to Mary. I haven't seen her in 2 years since we pulled her out of North Cove at the North Cove Yacht Club 2 years ago. That was an amazing encounter. It's one of the most amazing people I've ever met.
He let me take the shower and help put my car on the.
She needed that much more than I did. But what I wanted to say was, she was talking about the tidal, the effect of the tide and the currents. And there's an app that I use with my sailing in that area, in the lower part of the Connecticut River, where the tide is an influence, called My Tides. Is an app you can put on your phone, and you can bring up the tides, the times of the high tides, when the current shifts, all those kind of things, what the maximum flow is going to be. So it's a good resource if you're planning to go through there with something that's affected by the tides. It's called My Tides. It's an app I have. There's probably other ones like that. But it's useful for me as a sailor. Anyhow,
Wonderful.
I just wanted to share that with anyone thinking of doing the lower Connecticut River.
Thank you, Jim.
Mary,
Okay.
I'm following you. It's great.
That's great. I'll need to check the tides when I get to the Washington coast on the Pacific Northwest Trail.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
I can't wait for that one.
I'm not sure if Mary shared, she does keep a blog and is continually traveling and hiking and all the other things. So her blog will be in the resources list as well. Okay,
It's
I'm going to go
fascinating.
Yeah, I'm
back
gonna
to one of
start-
these other questions. People ask about resupplying and are there restaurants and how do you find these places and, are they mapped? Can you talk a little bit about just resupplying and convenience stores and how you plan for your food over time?
I did post some answers to these as people posted questions, I wrote in the chat. I don't know if they're showing up or what, but you can carry a lot more food in a boat than you can on your back with a backpack. And I dehydrate a lot of food. So I carried almost what I needed between sections. I knew I was going to make those runs back home. But there are a few places like Hanover, Wilder, where you could get out and you could buy your food. You could go into the town and buy it, or you can mail yourself packages, general delivery, you put your name on it, care of general delivery to post offices. That's also what we do when we're backpacking. For the charger, I used a 10,000 Nightcore, is a phenomenal little battery pack, incredibly lightweight. You keep your phone on airplane mode, and so it will last for me on airplane mode, even using the Far Out app with the GPS, especially if I turn the GPS off when I don't need it. I can make my phone last for 10 days out there. And then the battery pack can charge it for another 3 full charges at least. So I didn't need to charge it all that much. And there are a few places along the way, campgrounds or places where you can get out and charge it. The Far Out guide has a ton of stuff in it. I was trying to think. I think that's a lot of the as far as somebody asked about, Gabriel, ranges. I did not use the buoys. I just used the vest. So I think that answers a lot of the questions out there.
Yeah. Why don't we, in the last minute or two, if anybody want to raise their hand and ask another question? Okay. Sounds like we covered everything. I just wanted to give Jesse, Tina, and Tim a shout out also. And if you want to share a sentence or two about your recent journey, Jesse? I'm not to put you on the spot, only if you want to.
No, that's okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. It was great. It was everything I wanted and then some. It was hard, but it was fun. I laughed, I cried, I did all the things. It was just the best. And I want to do something like this again very soon.
Awesome. Great. And Tina and Tim, you want to share when you did your paddles? Tina? Oh, just got to unmute. Uh-oh. Tina, if you can hear me, we need you to unmute. And Tim, you can unmute while we're waiting. I don't think we're getting any sound. You can drop us a line in the chat, but you're driving, so don't do that.
Yeah.
We'll follow up with Tina, and maybe Tina's story is on our webpage. I don't know. Tim, how about you? When were you out on the river with your through journey?
Yeah.
2017. Yeah, it was great. And Mary, I don't know if you remember me, but I met you at the Rocky Hill Ferry Landing. I was going out to pull some water chestnut,
I
and you
do
were there
remember.
picking up your water.
I do remember. I as soon as she said that you were there, I do remember. Yeah.
Yeah. And so ever since my trip, I really like to, because I'm in the Connecticut area, I try to, when I learn of paddlers who are coming through, I always try to reach out to them and sometimes even paddle out and meet them on the river if I can. So just to encourage them.
This is a great network. So if anybody wants to try it. We're to the end of our hour, so I want to just appreciate everyone for coming out today and listening and sharing ideas and questions, and especially to Tim Walsh and Mary Badass Anderson and Gabrielle for leading the charge. And just want to share, this is our last live stream of the season, but we have a lot of in-person events, and you can check that out at ctriver.org/events. Our annual meeting is coming up the end of this month, and we're offering a chance to get on a boat ride, motorboated, and brunch, and a lot of fun. So check out our website for that. And as I mentioned earlier, I'll send you an email with everything you need to know going forward. Tina, just a quickie. I see that you're off mute. So do you just want to share when you were out, just to close the loop?
I started at Fourth Lake. We hiked up there, and that's a mystical place. It's gorgeous. And then we paddled on Third Lake, and then went down and paddled on Second Lake and kept on going. This was really more of a spiritual journey for me. I haven't written up about it on the website. It was to celebrate my 75th year on this planet. And I had a wild time. And one of the best parts of all of this group is meeting Tim Walsh and helping him in the lower part of the Connecticut River. We had such a great time. I'd like to go back and do it again. Actually, I might do that next year. So lovely to see all of you. And thank you so much for doing this. This is wonderful.
Yeah, thanks to you all. We hope to do it again another time. So have a wonderful afternoon, and we'll see you at another event soon.
And you'll be posting my blog, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. I just put it up there.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks all.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.